Cintaku bertemu harap yang pada rintihan nera asmara. Kau kehidupanku meski kau tak tahu, ada aku di hidupmu yang ku mau kau untukku. Meskipun kau merindu engkau, aku suka.
Infrastruktur menjadi lokomotif pembangunan nasional dan daerah yang menggerakkan pertumbuhan ekonomi suatu negara. Oleh karenanya, penting bagi pemerintah untuk mewujudkan kehadiran infrastruktur dalam kehidupan masyarakat, terutama infrastruktur dasar seperti penyediaan air minum, sanitasi, listrik, perumahan, jalan, serta fasilitas kesehatan dan pendidikan. Guna mendorong pertumbuhan yang inklusif di wilayah Indonesia yang berupa kepulauan, pemerintah juga terus mendorong pembangunan infrastruktur konektivitas seperti pembangunan pelabuhan, bandara, moda transportasi massal, jalan tol, dan konektivitas digital. Kementerian Perencanaan Pembangunan memperkirakan kebutuhan pembiayaan infrastruktur mencapai Rp6.445 triliun sepanjang periode 2020 hingga 2024. Angka ini cukup fantastis di tengah keterbatasan anggaran. Untuk itu, pemerintah telah menyusun kebijakan dan langkah strategis untuk memenuhi kebutuhan tersebut. Salah satunya adalah dengan mengoptimalkan keterlibatan pendanaan privat melalui skema KPBU dan blended finance. Diharapkan optimalisasi skema-skema pembiayaan inovatif tersebut dapat memenuhi 42% kebutuhan pembiayaan infrastruktur. Dalam mengimplementasikan skema pembiayaan inovatif, pemerintah juga memperhatikan isu perubahan iklim, isu sosial, dan elemen kualitas lainnya dalam pembiayaan infrastruktur. Target Indonesia untuk mencapai Nationally Determined Contribution pada tahun 2030 dan komitmen pemerintah untuk memperhatikan kesinambungan fiskal, kepastian penyediaan layanan kepada masyarakat, dan keberlanjutan layanan menjadi fokus utama dalam formulasi berbagai kebijakan pembiayaan infrastruktur. Salah satunya dengan penerapan prinsip-prinsip quality infrastruktur investment dalam penyiapan proyek KPBU dan upaya membangun kerangka ESG dalam investasi proyek-proyek infrastruktur publik. Dengan demikian, struktur pembiayaan proyek dapat menarik lebih banyak investasi dari pasar keuangan global. Guna mendukung pelaksanaan skema blended finance ini, berbagai akses telah disediakan pemerintah Indonesia untuk investor, seperti akses untuk pendanaan proyek KPBU, Green Bond, dan SDG Indonesia One. Skema KPBU sendiri merupakan suatu bentuk kerjasama antara pemerintah dan badan usaha dalam penyediaan layanan infrastruktur untuk kepentingan umum.
Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Indonesia PPPDay. The next project showcase for today is Transition to Net Zero implementing ESG in water sector infrastructure investment. PPP in Indonesia has now begun to prepare for infrastructure projects that have adopted green and sustainability principles through ESG approach in project preparation. However, an understanding of the preparation and challenges of the PPP project towards the principle needs to be harmonized with the global stakeholders who have experiences in implementing green and sustainable PPP project. This session will explore how to prepare green, sustainable, and affordable PPP projects in water sector infrastructure. Conducting as a moderator in Dubai is Andini Effendi. Andini Effendi started her career as a model in 2000. In 2005, she began her career as a journalist and TV presenter who has covered political, legal, and human interest news. Today, Andini Effendi is hosting a TV program called Q&A in Metro TV. I will now give the floor to you, Andini Effendi in Dubai.
Thank you, Alin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon from Dubai. My name is Andini Effendi. I will lead the session for this afternoon. We'll be discussing about infrastructure. We're focusing on water project. As we know, infrastructure is a catalyst to promote higher and inclusive economic growth. President Jokowi's administration has made infrastructure a crucial agenda. And based on the Madam Minister of Finance talking points, infrastructure is the backbone of the economic recovery. Hence, it is a necessity to adapt a new perspective of investment, especially on the green and sustainable aspect. With this, PPPDay is a synergy action with UAE as the strategic partner in bolstering investor interest for green investment in Indonesia. I will share a context for the business forum as part of the PPPDay, where this showcase, the project showcase, aims to focus on PPP practice, particularly on the implementation of environment, social, and governance aspect within the project preparation process. And this session will showcase a project in the water sector, focusing on the approach of preparing and structuring a bankable project according to the ESG standards while aligning with market appetite. As one of UN's SDGs, water security has been a central component of global development work. Water is irreplaceable when it comes to supporting life and well-being. And this showcase will highlight the Jati Gede Water Supply PPP project, and you will see the profile of the project and also the ESG indicators fulfillment during project preparation, also the bankability aspects of it, and the cost implication, and the information hub, also the communication strategy to partners. The objective of this session is to gain insight and inputs from sector experts and also financiers, which will be represented by discussant presence in the session. Before we start the discussion, I would like to share with you what is the project of Jati Gede Water Supply PPP.
West Java province is the most populous province in Indonesia and the second largest province in the island of Java, with 27 municipalities. With a population of around 49 million people in 2020 and its proximity to Jakarta as the capital city of Indonesia, the West Java province has been focused towards development of national activity centers. One of them is the Greater Cirebon region. The development of this region, which covers Cirebon Regency, Cirebon City, Indramayu Regency, Sumedang Regency, and Majalengka Regency, should be supported by sufficient coverage of clean water. Therefore, Phase 1 development of the Greater Cirebon Metropolitan Area, or Jati Gede Regional Water Supply Project, is considered necessary to fulfill the needs of clean water for the people in this region. The West Java Provincial Government, as the Government Contracting Agency or GCA, will develop a regional water supply facility through Public-Private Partnership or PPP scheme. The PPP project scope will cover upstream facilities with a production capacity of 1,500 liters per second, which will be connected to distribution networks to serve 5 municipalities through 8 offtake units. Through the PPP scheme, the implementing business entity or IBE will finance, design, build and operate water production and transmission facilities within the Greater Cirebon area. A regional water treatment plant or WTP will be built by the IBE, as well as transmission network installation with a total length of approximately 150 kilometers to the offtake units. The implementing business entity will also operate the water intake facility from Cimanuk River and other upstream facilities which include WTP and the transmission networks. In this project, the West Java province acts as the Government Contracting Agency or GCA for the Jati Gede Regional Water Supply PPP project, where PT Tirta Gamma Ripa or PT TGR, the regional water supply company, will be assigned as the GCA from the transaction phase. The project also involves local water companies or PDAMs and local governments from 5 municipalities with the support from central government, namely the Ministry of Public Works and Housing. Commitment from all relevant stakeholders is the key in successfully delivering this project. The role of stakeholders is aligned with the project's plan to implement a blended financing scheme for the Jati Gede water supply project, which could be financed through numerous sources, such as the government, private sector, multilateral agencies, as well as the use of municipal loan from PT Sarana Multi-Infrastruktur Persero, or PT-SMI, based on the analysis conducted in the final business case at the preparation stage. Through the project development facility support from the Ministry of Finance via PT-SMI as the facility implementing agency, the Jati Gede water supply PPP project will be facilitated until the project has reached financial closing and ensure that the process has implemented sustainable practices that are in line with G20 quality infrastructure as well as green funding frameworks and future implementation of the environmental, social and governance or ESG framework. Through this project, the quality, quantity and continuity of clean water is expected to be improved and accessible by residents of Greater Cirebon area in West Java province. These objectives are also aligned with Sustainable Development Goals or SDGs, promoting the improvement of living standards for the current and next generation.
To delve more into Jati Gede Water Supply PPP project, please welcome the Project Director of Jati Gede Water Supply Project PPP Project, Mr. Boy Aditya Prakarsa.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Andini. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this time for our presentation on the Jati Gede project. Please allow me to start the presentation regarding about the Jati Gede water supply project for this time. Okay. The first slide, I think, during my presentation here, maybe if the slide can be shown. Okay, thank you. Please allow me to also introduce who is PT-SMI. Actually, PT-SMI is state-owned enterprise owned by the Ministry of Finance, and we are totally owned 100% by the Ministry of Finance. So basically, SMI is the key feature of the government tools to penetrate the public and also the private in order to enabling the investment and acceleration of infrastructure development. We also have the vision of leading the catalyst to be the leading catalyst in the acceleration on the national infrastructure development. We also have a dream mission to become the strategic partner who provides added value in infrastructure development in Indonesia. Number two is we also to establish the flexible financing products. And the third is to provide the quality services which comply with the GCG or good corporate governance. Next slide, please. Just to give the illustration on how SMI is being mandated by the Ministry of Finance, this is the illustration on how the project assignment scheme based on the assignment from the Ministry of Finance. As you can see that the structure is Ministry of Finance is delegate the authority to the Direktorat Jenderal of Budget and Financing and also the risk management. In here, the DGR is assigned the PTSMI, and PTSMI here become the facilitation of the PDF or the project development facility. In here is it is international best practice is we to provide the consultant that can prepare the project, all the PPP project to be prepared by well-known firms such as like PwC, SMEC, which based in Australia, and also from the legal consultant, which is national because the legal system in Indonesia. As you can see here, we working together with the West Java provincial government, with the governor itself, to repackage the project and also to structure the project to become a bankable project. Our scope is actually for the project management, project preparation. We make the final business case on also the project supporting documents until the PPP bidding process, until the financial close of the project itself. Next slide, please. And the project itself, if I can give the brief information about the project of Jati Gede itself, is you can see this is the map of Indonesia, and this is the island of Java Island. This Java Island is the West Java province is located in Java Island, and this is the most populated province in Java, I think. And as you can see that we have 5 municipalities that will receive the water and become the beneficiary of the project itself. While, as you can see, the partnership scheme here is to design, build, finance, maintenance, operate, and transfer the project until the end of the concession period, which will be 32 years, including the construction years. As you can see as well, here is the return of the investment, or what we call the revenue stream of the project itself. It will be using a user charge, or what we call it a take or pay. So basically there will be no demand risk borne by the private entity on this project. So everything will be take or pay and no demand risk on the project itself. And you can see the long-term concession period is also to provide a greater benefit for investor and lenders, as well as the public side, based on the assessment on the value for money for this project itself. And as you can see, this water project itself, the water project has become the one of priority in sector in government of Indonesia, and it is mandatory to have the water supply in 100% by 2024. And here we also have the indicative project timeline, which now we are in the phase of FBC, or final business case, which will be completed by Q2 of this year. And we begin to entering the transaction phase by entering the pre-qualification by the Q3 of 2022. And we expected to have the target of financial close by the end of 2024. And this project is also the national strategic project, which regulated by presidential regulation by Pak Jokowi. Next slide, please. And this is the illustration of the project structure, which you already viewed in the video earlier. That this is just to show the holistic view of the project itself, on how we manage the project and how we want to make the project become more bankable, more secure, And especially the project still a bankable project. This is the robust project structure, what we previously introduced in the previous water project in Umbulan, which already in the construction and operation phase. The structure actually should set the tone of the government on how actually our government provide a strong leadership and commitment as well for the government support for this project. As you can see in here in the structure, there will be a lot of government support from the Ministry of Public Works and also from the Ministry of Finance to support the province of West Java. And in here, you can also see that our fellow SMVs from IGF of PTPI also provide the guarantee agreement to the project, which include the political and also the financial obligation of the project itself. And this structure also to show the blended finance and to show the funding from the government side and also the financing part of the project from the lenders and also from the investors on the side. Next slide, please. To complete the illustration, I also want to provide the schematic of the project on how we actually integrate the system of this water supply project from upstream to the downstream until the connection of household. As you can see, there's the construction phase and also the O&M phase. It will be more blended, conducted by the Ministry of Public Works in here. And we are using PPP for the construction of the upstream and also the midstream. And the downstream is based on the municipalities. And also for the O&M, here we are using the PPP scheme and also the PDAM on the household connection. So actually, this is how the collaboration may bring benefits and also outcome to all partners. And we want to attract more investors in this project and also for the lenders. Next slide, please. Just also to want to emphasize on the blended finance itself. This is actually the more holistic view on how actually the blended finance is introduced in our PPP project. This PPP project, as you can see, if we see on the upstream until the transmission and also the distribution stream, also the downstream, we can see that financing source or funding source is become a vary from the government budget, from the national budget and also from the local budget. And we also can provide the municipal loan from PTSMI. And we are using also the public partnership to introduce for the project itself for the transmission unit. And the multilateral or donor support can also introduce this project to support for the technical assistance or any other means for the project itself. As you can see, there will be a lot of involvement from the stakeholders, from the government, from multilaterals, or we also have the support from SDG Indonesia One platform on this side, from the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Public Works, in the whole is from the government of Indonesia itself. This project also, we aim to have a better structure and better project, become more bankable project to attract a better financing, especially for the green financing. And as an additional feature for the government is also we are promoting the implementation of ESG for the PPP project. Next slide, please. This is actually the ongoing initiative from the Ministry of Finance. And as you can see that we are in the midst of making the framework of the ESG platform itself. And you can see this is the guideline on how the government support to enhance the project which developed in the country, especially the project supported by Ministry of Finance. So basically, this is the outline on the framework itself, from the number one, introduction, policy and legal foundation. The number two is policy, risk and risk mitigation policy. Number three, the organization and roles. Number four, the environmental and social standard. And five, the implementation phase. And number six, the closing of the ESG itself. Next slide, please. And also just to provide the illustration on how actually we provide the ESG in the project itself or within the SMVs. We are PTSMI, we also have the ESG internal guideline, and on how we actually implement the project itself based on the ESG. for the pre-feasibility studies which currently being conducted by PTSMI. I think it is paramount for the government to have this principle implemented, and yet still to manage the project is still bankable, can attract from the investor side and also on the lender side. So basically, I will not read one by one, but actually this is the 12th principle what we have currently in our guidelines. As you can see, from the environment and social assessment, labor working condition, until the consultation and grievance of handling mechanism. So actually, this will already completed and will be conducted on this water supply project and also on Jati Gede water project. Next slide, please. This is for the detail on how we manage to identify and also how we further arrange this 12 principle to become the project itself. So actually, as you can see, we try to manage and identify everything to become ESG compliant. So it is very important actually on how this one of the example of the pilot project that will be using the ESG framework, and also how the principle can be implemented to the project itself. And finally, this all will be covered under the project documents that will be introduced also to the private sector during the transaction phase. And lastly, I think on the last slide is about the ESG cost implication under Ministry of Finance, because we are special mission vehicles under Ministry of Finance. Actually, we also try to have this opportunity to make the ESG principle can be implemented, and also we strongly commit to enabling and also implementing the ESG in all PPP projects, not only on the water supply project. Jati Gede as well is also one of the priority projects that will be implementing the ESG principle. And I think it's also important and also our priority for the government to bring the project to the worldwide market, and also introducing the project development and management of PPP infrastructure project. Lastly, with the strong government support, it is important to involve the private, working and collaborating with the public side to bring more benefit for the people of West Java. I think that's all. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this time for presentation. I give it back to you, Andini. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Boy. Do you mind to join me here as we will start the discussion for the session? We have speakers spread all over the world, literally. We have Ms. Giovanna Monti, Senior Environmental Specialist from International Finance Corporation. I believe Ms. Giovanna is now in Budapest. And also ada Pak Irman Boyle, Head of Advisory Group, the Indonesian Infrastructure Finance, who is now in Jakarta. And also Mr. Kinchan from Public-Private Partnership Specialist from Asian Development Bank in Manila. And last but not least, we have Bapak Taufik Budi Santoso, the Assistant of Economic Development from West Java Provincial Government, who is based in Bandung. And we have Mas Boy, who are here with us as well. And so we will talk about, we see the showcase of the project of Jati Gede Water Project. And then actually you put not only ESG, but also H, which is health, in the implementation, because you're also focusing on how is the impact for the livelihood of the people there. So so that is very crucial as well, and very thoughtful project, which we will discuss. And also the cost implication you mentioned is one of the consequences of the ESG, however, is a long-term investment. And then again, we also deal with people. So let's discuss this. I believe all speakers are here with us. All of them are here, because I cannot see them right now. I'll go over to Giovanna. Ibu Giovanna, I guess I want to hear more on how ESG principles are implemented based on your experience in developing countries?
Thanks, Andini. Thanks a lot. And let me start actually. Thank you for the opportunity to be here in this panel and discuss the ESG principle. I want to answer first a question that we always get. Is like there are many financial institutions out there, and it seems that each of them has its own standards. So what are these international ESG standards? And the standards of developing financial institutions such as the IFC that I represent, the Asian Development Bank, and my colleague is here, and the World Bank, they are all based on few and common principle, right? That the people should not be worse off because of the project, that they have the right to be informed and consulted about the project, that you should do avoidance and minimization of risk as much as possible, and that your mitigation measure should be commensurate to the risk. So these are the common core principle. And through the years, the development financial institutions have essentially gone through a process of harmonization that leads towards a common risk-based approach. And today they are quite similar. In IFC, where I come from, we have the IFC performance standard, but we haven't developed them in isolation, right? We have looked at good international practice, and we have codified what it is a risk management tool for environmental and social risk. And this tool, this approach has become the benchmark for environmental and social risk management in project financing, to the point that nowadays 85% and more of international financing in emerging markets is covered by the performance standard. And this because it's not only IFC that implements there are other financial institutions. For example, you might have heard of the Equator Banks, or so-called Equator Banks, the signatory of the Equator Principle, 130 institutions. They apply the performance standard, as do the export credit agency of OECD countries. Now, when it comes to implementing ESG standards in developing countries, one of the issues or the challenge that we face is that often the ESG aspects are considered late in the development of a project. And this means that you have to retrofit the approach. And retrofitting is always complex, right? It's complex for technical and for ENS aspects. And sometimes it's not possible. And when it's possible, it's often brings in some delays and some additional costs. So in Indonesia, when in 2015 you have adopted the Presidential Regulation 38 from the perspective of an ESG practitioner in the PPP space, a fundamental steps in the implementation of the ESG standard was taken, because as you know, this regulation defines the PPP framework. And from my perspective, the ESG1 does a very important thing. It asks to have an environmental study as part of your PPP project preparation, right? And so at the same time, you're doing your technical and your financial pre-feasibility, you are doing an environmental and social pre-feasibility. And this is very important because one of the key elements to be effective and efficient in managing environmental and social risk is to avoid or minimize them in the first place. And you can really be successful in avoiding and minimizing if you consider ESG aspect early in the project preparation. So from our perspective, the application of international standards, they opens the door to international financing, right? As has been already said, but they are also a proven tool for risk management. And we know nowadays that environmental and social and governance risk are very much operation risk, they are financial risk, and they are also reputation risk for project developers, sponsors, and the contracting agency. So I'll stop here.
Giovanna, as we saw from the showcase of the project earlier by Mas Boy, there is a cost implication, which is one of the consequences of ESG implementation. So would you see that this have any impact though on the cost of the project, particularly if we're talking about water project?
Yes, so let's explore a little bit more the benefits of implementing the ESG standard in project preparation, specifically in the water sector, because one of the things, Andini, that we often hear is that, oh, international standards, they bring in excessive costs, or water projects, by definition, they are beneficial. So there are no ESG or very limited ESG risk, right? And I want to give you some examples from our global work in PPP advisory, right? The first example is a greenfield water supply project, and the project is of public interest. So the government has the right to expropriate. This is a different country, it's not Indonesia, has the right to expropriate. The government needs international financing because there isn't enough financing capacity within the country, right? So he knows that they have to implement international standards when it comes to land acquisition. And we have done, as part of our preparation work, some estimates. And to apply international standards, it means that the cost of compensation would likely be 10 times higher the cost of expropriation. Now, if I tell you 10 times, that seems a lot. But if I put it in perspective, then things seem different, right? In this case, the 10 times more is only 0.3% of the capex of the project. And what makes the project accessing international financing, that is also cheaper financing, and that will lead to more competitive bids, right? So this is a cost, but it's a cost that makes the project bankable. It's also a risk management approach, as I said before, because it avoids delays and disputes with the community. And it is also what makes the project socially sustainable, because people will be compensated and will be not worse off because of the project. Let me give you another example. It's still a water project, but this time is a brownfield one. And there is a canal that brings water to the city. And our due diligence or our review in the project preparation identified that there are some communities along the canal that they are informally accessing the water. But once the PPP is implemented, they will not be able to do so because the water will be piped. There will not be an open canal, right? So lack of access to water for them is going to be a significant impact, right? But the fact that we have recognized this early in the project preparation means that the solution and the costs associated to the solution could be incorporated in the project structure, right? So it doesn't come as a surprise to the bidders. Everyone knows it. And then once again, the project is bankable because the ESG principles were considered very early. Last example. It's securing the right of way for a transmission line, right? And if I tell you, would you prefer to spend $150,000 per day for at minimum a month, or do you prefer to spend $200,000 per year for 2 years? I think the answer is obvious, right? Everyone would want to spend $400,000, and that's it. And that would be the cost that this company could have spent if the ESG principle were embedded in the project preparation. Unfortunately, they have underestimated the impacts of securing the right of way, and they started construction without having enough engaged with the affected people and without having compensated them sufficiently. So the people start protesting. And then there wasn't a prompt answer from the company, and so the people blocked the right of way, and that's what led to the losses. So let me conclude here. And I gave you 3 examples, and they are all talking about social aspects. And that's because in our perspective, what we see globally is that often the social aspects are the more challenging. However, I could have given you also examples related to environmental aspects. So when it comes to water projects, yes, they are very much needed, beneficial, but they also have ESG risks, right? So it's important that the ESG principles are considered early in the project stage. And when it comes to cost and this perception of excessive cost, I want to argue that it's a different allocation of cost, right? Most of the time is deciding on whether you want to spend for risk management or for crisis management, and deciding whether you want to spend at a different phase of your project development, right? You spend at the project preparation to avoid spending more during project implementation. I stop here. Thank you.
Very well. So there is a cost of sustainability, but there's also a reward of being socially responsible. I move on to Pak Irman. Pak Irman, so we're talking about a preparation stage right now. If we look at the project that we're discussing today, so what needs to, I guess, to prepare in order to develop a more robust business case, and also to closely engage with green financiers, and moreover to ensure the projects receive financing for green projects?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting IIF to also contribute in this event. So with regard to project preparation for water supply projects, PPP1, and also with in consideration of the green financings, yeah. So actually doing water supply projects in Indonesia is pretty much straightforward, that it can be put into sustainable projects in terms of the green aspect and also in terms of social aspects. So the project can easily, reach or meet the sustainable development goals related to the social and environmental issue, for example, to the preserving natural resources and ecosystem, improving access to sanitation for people and most of the community, for example. So it ticks most of the criteria and compliance requirement for sustainable projects, and will therefore be eligible for green financing or sustainable financings. So in terms of what we should do to really realize this potential, is first, of course, is back to the project identification. So the government contracting authorities, either the city government, either the provincial government, either the the national government, the Ministry of Public Works, for example, and also with the the PDAM, the locally owned water utility company. First, they should identify which project that they will pursue. And basically, in the current market in Indonesia, the trend is very encouraging. For example, we see a lot of regional water supply projects coming in. So regional water project is basically very encouraged because it's optimize the reach of economies of scale, right? One intake facility, one major transmission pipeline, for example, can be used to serve several municipalities, and therefore, on the upstream side, it can reach the economies of scale, and also optimize the use of surface water, right? So that's one. And then second, a lot of current projects that is currently offered in the market is promoted to use to decrease the use of groundwater. So this is pretty much encouraging that basically most of the current water consumption in most of the municipalities is basically coming from the groundwater. So a lot of new projects will replace this, will offer a substitute to this groundwater, and with the right city government policy, the project will be able to decrease the use of groundwater, and this will have a lot of impact in terms of preserving natural resources, preserving the ecosystems, for example, and also in most major cities in Indonesia, like Jakarta, for example, Semarang, for example, it also address the issues of land subsidence. So this is crucial issues for beachfront city like Jakarta and also Semarang. So once the local governments, the PDAMs can identify the correct projects, can identify the correct design of the projects, where the water source will be sourced from, for example, and then how the transmission pipeline will be developed, and how it is going to be distributed along the potential consumer area to replace the use of groundwater. So once we can do that, basically the project has ticked most of the compliance requirement for sustainable projects. So and then in this process, as Pak Boy already mentioned before, once we have that basic underlying projects, we can do our homework of doing a proper SNE due diligence, for example, requiring technical specifications, and then also to the extent that we can also push the potential bidders to access the green financing, for example. So designing the project from the early preparation of the projects, from the philosophy, from design, for the need of the projects, for the design philosophy, and then for the construction and operational criteria, and eventually up to the financing criteria, the project can be basically really customized or designed for sustainable financings. So I think that's what we've been doing in Indonesia for now. The likes of PTSMI and also Indonesia Infrastructure Finance, we've been mandated by the Ministry of Finance to help government contracting authorities in doing these proper project preparations, and we ensure that all the project feasibility study take all these requirements, and then eventually it will be reflected in the project documentation and project agreements. So we are mandated by the government to work with them until the achievement of financial close. So institutions like PTSMI and IIF is in the position to be involved in from the project beginning, from the project preparation up to the financial close. We talk with potential project bidders, with potential project sponsors. We talk with potential lenders as to ensure their appetite on their financing requirement are met within the project design, and with the goal of obtaining sustainable finance. So I think that's how the proper way of or even how we are doing it for now. So start with the proper project identifications, right? Build a fit project design, project philosophy that will comply with the sustainable financing requirements. I think
Very
that's
well.
what can I say about it? Yeah.
Very well, Pak Iwan. But is it possible though, if we lower the cost of fund by implementing ESG?
Hello, sorry.
Is it possible to lower the cost of fund by implementing ESG?
Yes, I understand you correctly. Sorry. It is part of our mandate to not only for the project preparation, but also to basically at least to become a catalyst in the project financing eventually. If I understand your question correctly. Yeah.
Right, Iwan? Can you hear me? Can you hear me fine?
Hello, yes, please go ahead.
Yes, yeah, so the question was, so if we're talking about this implementation of ESG, and then how important it is for the long-term investment and stuff. So, and then especially on the preparation stage of a project, and as we see from the project that SME has right now, I guess the focus now, is it something that is feasible to do if the cost of fund lowered, still implementing ESG?
you mean to obtain the lower financing costs? Is that
Yes.
the question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So that's I think as already Giovanna already mentioned before, yeah. So SNE compliance may increase, the project costs, but only marginally, basically. It will be outdone by, the a wider source for financing. So basically, you will have a wider financing base to access to. And to the extent that how you can, access the facilities. There are some bilateral facilities, for example, multilateral facilities, and also blended finance facilities that can be utilized to access this financing source. And eventually, you can, to the extent that you can select a more competitive financing source at which eventually you will be able to optimize your project delivery. Yeah.
Very well. Let's move on to Mr. Kin Wai Chan from ADB. Hi, Mr. Kin.
Hi, Adini. Very nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too. So I've been informed that you have experience working on projects not only in Indonesia but also in Southeast Asia. Maybe you can share your experience by adopting ESG principles in specifically water infrastructure projects globally, particularly what you've done in you're working on in Southeast Asia and Indonesia.
Sure, happy to. And before I start off, I want to thank Pak Boy for his very good update on the Jati Gede project. We've had many conversations on that project previously, so it's great to hear that that project is going well. Going back to your question, Andini, I think, first of all, just want to confirm that the water sector is key sector for achievement of SDGs and therefore remains a focus for our PPP work across the Asian Development Bank. And that focus has led on to collaboration that we have at the moment with the Ministry of Public Works and Housing and Bappenas to develop the source tap water spike concept that we hope will really help the implementation of a holistic whole value chain water supply in Indonesia. So I think, that really shows how involved we are as a bank in terms of supporting the sector. Now, going back in terms of experiences of adopting ESG principles in water sector and projects, not only in Indonesia, but also around the region, I think the first thing I would say, and it's not just applies to water sector, is about the need to really capacity build and get the buy-in of the project owners, the GCAs. I think many in this call here are very familiar with the issues and what we need to do, but ultimately it's the project owners who really need to really buy into the concept and to own it. And what I mean by that is that they need to understand that every project decision that they make is extremely important. I think my colleague from IFC mentioned earlier about, the poor preparation and project decisions that are made. And I think I will concur with that. And I think we need to really work with the project to make sure they understand what the concept is and what the benefits are for applying ESG. If you don't have that ownership from above in terms of the project owners, then decisions will just be made by other people who don't own the project. And that I think we've seen in many, many sectors, and especially in the water sector across the region, is that leads to bad decisions. And that leads to decisions that are made across the different streams, the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream that Pak Boy had earlier shown on the slide about, water intake, water treatment and transmission, and then water distribution. Decisions has to be made across those streams in a way that is coordinated. Decisions that affect across the environmental, social, and governance aspects of the whole entire value chain. And I think that's also a really important point to make, is that, getting the buy-in of project owners is important, but also to making people aware that you should be looking across the entire value chain, not just the PPP element of it all. So I know this is a PPP event, but I think what we've learned in other places is that if you only focus on the scope of the PPP project and apply, say, ESG principles there in isolation, then you'll find that not being dealt with properly in the upstream or the downstream, which are interfacing with the scope of the PPP project. And that will lead to problems down the line. And I think that's something that's also very important to be reminded. And I think also just another really important lessons learned since the work we do is we need to recognize these projects are very long term, 25, 30, 40-year concession periods. And during that time frame, things will change. All PP change, but more so in the water sector than others. Climate change will definitely impact how these projects will need to be implemented by the private sector. And so we have to make sure that when you are planning for these type of projects from the beginning, as my colleague from IC said, you need to implement risk mitigation at a very early stage when you're master planning for these projects, not when you're even developing feasibility studies. I think it's good if you must, but actually you need to think about it right from the beginning. When you're thinking about how all three elements work together to be a coherent project that delivers the outcomes for the people. And I think that's also an extremely important point. And just to touch upon your earlier discussion with Pat Boy about financing costs, fully concur that this actually, if you apply ESG, then I think there's definitely a way to really look to reduce the cost of financing. And I think if projects in Indonesia can start looking in terms of sustainability infrastructure labeling, such as the Fast Infra initiative that is happening at the moment and led by the Climate Policy Institute and supported by IFC and GIF and OECD. I think that's a very important initiative which can really help people understand how applying ESG principles can actually be seen as a positive by lenders and as well as, of course, development finance institutions such as IFC and ADB. And I think it's important to kind of highlight that to the project owners, going right back to the beginning about project owner ownership. So I think that's the kind of key point I would like to share from my experiences of applying PPPs in the water sector.
Very well. So we're talking about ESG implementation. There is a possibility that there is an additional cost that may arise, right, by implementation of ESG principles, particularly in infrastructure development. So how can projects deal with this? How should they deal with it? I guess that's the main point.
Sure. I mean, I think it's unavoidable costs, as mentioned by my panelists, but they're a relatively small amount compared to the size of these projects and the kind of cost of delivering those over the 30 years. But I think what really is important, and going back to my earlier point about initial project preparation work, if project owners are able to access, say, trust funds to improve the way they design and design projects across the value chain, then I think you'll minimize some of those ESG costs actually. Because what happens is that if you do it too late, then the cost is much higher. And I think that's what people see a lot, because those things are not managed early enough for the cost to be, minimized. So I think, access to funding to do that early work, I think it's important for project owners. For example, in the Philippines, where we did a water project, we accessed an urban climate change resilience trust fund, where we utilized that grant funding to help us review the master plan for that project. And through that review of the master plan, we were able to convince the project owner that actually you shouldn't rechannel and the river. You should actually, leave the river as it is so that it's able to, accommodate for swell and flooding, whilst utilizing some of the land on either side of the river for, public projects like, riverside parks to really increase the value of those projects. And I think through that work, which is really linked to early kind of, master planning, we were able to convince the client at a very early stage of making a key decision that would have really impacted on ESG costs down the line. So I think that's a good example of early work and really minimize your costs. And this is just, good standard risk management and risk mitigation, but applied from an ESG angle, as mentioned by, IFC colleague. So I think that's, how I'd say you would try to minimize by doing it early. But I would also say, and going back to the earlier discussion on cost of financing, project owners and project stakeholders involved in these projects needs to recognize costs across the life cycle, the whole life, long term of these projects. It isn't just a matter of, project cost, lowest project cost wins, you must have to understand how applying ESG could improve the competitiveness of the financing that's provided during construction. It would actually also improve potentially the refinancing costs, which these projects will also face given durations. Because if you have ESG applied, you're probably going to lower your cost of refinancing down the line. And then finally, and this is a very pertinent point in Indonesia, if asset recycling is really becoming a trend and a very much a big focus for government, then looking at applying ESG is also important, because you want to make sure those assets are really going to get the best value for money, back for the people, because you want the market to be able to really see these assets as attractive. We want funds that are looking at these assets to be able to say, these projects tick the box, and therefore, and because a lot of mutual funds really have a massive and growing ESG requirement. So I think longer term asset recycling is also an important point there.
Right. So there's always like a creative ways to, anticipate the cost that may arise. So before we move on to the project in West Java, I would like to invite, for those of you who are here with us in Dubai or online, if you have questions or comments or anything that you want to share, please write down your name, affiliation, and then also question, comments, or whatever, and address to any of the speakers, or you can address to Masboy as well if you want to know more about the project. And then our committee here will be collecting those pointers and send it to me, and then we will discuss it as the discussion flow goes. We move on to West Java with Bapak Taufik Budi Santoso. Maybe you can share, Pak Taufik, your experience by implementing ESG principles and the benefits to the public and anyone related to the project. What are like the challenges and issues that you experience by implementing ESG in other projects maybe?
Yes. Thank you, Andini. Good afternoon, honorable ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to have some comment related with ESG in West Java. So we have a strong commitment to implementing the ESG principle in our project, development project. It can be shown by political will from our governors and also from our parliament to support the ESG implementation in policies and programs, and also to promote sustainable development, environmental and social consideration in infrastructure investment, especially. And we have several progress ongoing PPP project which implementing the ESG principle, such as the Nambo waste treatment. This is waste to energy to RDF, refuse device fuel. And then the second one, this is the ongoing, the Nambo waste treatment is already in construction right now. And then the second one is related when waste treatment also in Legok Nangka. This is supported also by central government, by Ministry of Finance and also Ministry of Public Works and other agencies, Ministry of Planning. This is in transaction phase right now. And then we already preparation also the water supply in Bandung, especially related with unsolicited PPP. And then the last one is Jati Gede water supply project that already mentioned by Pak Boy in the previous presentation. So what the benefit of the ESG principle apply in our development? So I think the first one is related with provide better services to the people. with this new technology and then adaptation of environment and others. So we hope that the service to the people are better. Like I mentioned that this Jati Gede project will serve more than 120,000 new connection to the people in these 5 municipal and agency. And then the second one is, I think, attract green financing to the project, and we hope that the project Jati Gede especially can be attract more green funding, green financing, so hopefully also provide benefit lastly to the people itself. And then the third one is contribute to the in promoting SDGs goals, which may lead to increased quality of life to the society. And the challenges, this is the what we discussed from Giovanna and also Pak Kin. Yeah, I think the first one is related with capacity building of GCA. I think this is important. And then the second one is related with how we integrate the upstreaming project with downstreaming until the connection to the people. It should be in one integration project, not only collaboration between the stakeholders, but also in terms of the project itself, because we have intake in the upstreaming until connection to the people in downstreaming. I think this is what we already discussed with Pak Boy in SMI, with the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Public Works, to make it not only blended finance, but also a collaborative project. And then the third one is related with the affordability to pay from not only from the people especially, but also how it can connect and balance if we compare with bankability and financial aspect from the investor. So the key point is the tariff. So the central government already defined several solutions for that, like viability gap fund, and then initiating subsidies from central government and also from provincial government. That will be prepared also in this discussion with PT SMI for the preparation of the project. I think that's all, Bu Andini.
Pak Taufik, it's very interesting because I'm actually surprised that West Java province already have this progressive mindset to implement ESG on your infrastructure projects, particularly in water project. So I guess also what I need to delve more into, what are the benefits for the people? I know you're one of the, if not the most populous province in Indonesia, and what are the benefits that people gain from this, and how can we also spread this to other provinces in Indonesia, that it actually works in West Java?
Yes, thank you, Andini. Yeah, I think water is really a basic need for the people. So we are right now, the challenges, the big challenges in basic needs in West Java is how we can serve the water, clean water to the people itself. So I think through this project, we can increase the scope of the water supply in West Java, especially in this area, because this area will be the new growth area in West Java, the Cirebon, Greater Cirebon. So that will be 13 new cities in this area. So we have to prepare it and not only serve the existing demand, but also what is the newest, the new demand that will come in the future. So that's the first comment to your first question. And about how we, I think what we preparation that we already done with PTSMI and then Ministry of Finance can be adapted or replicated to other provinces. And I think like Mr. Bram already have presentation before, there are several numbers of projects under these PPP schemes assisted and supported by Ministry of Finance and other ministry in Indonesia. Thank you, Andini.
Thank you, Pak Taufik. I'm still waiting for more questions and comments. We do have one question coming in. I guess this is a question that we can discuss by all of the speakers. This question is from Anonymous, because I don't have the name for this. Can kindly put the name and the affiliation for those who share their thoughts and questions. The question is how to increase the capacity of the project owner, GCA, with regards to implement the ESG framework to develop a project. Because as we all know, not all GCA is familiar with PPP, and now we are going to implement ESG. So how to increase the capacity of the project owner to implement ESG framework to develop a project? I guess I can start with Giovanna, and then we can discuss this. This is an open discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead.
Thanks, Andini. So, look, from my perspective, capacity building of, the responsible agency is very much important. And sometimes what we found in our experience that it's important the capacity that, IFC or a multilateral can brings to the table. But oftentimes it's also very important the knowledge sharing between peers, right? The facilitation that we can make between, maybe even different country of different regions, but same type of project, same type of agency, and this knowledge sharing across region, across country, it is very valuable, and it is something that I think we should all think of promoting more.
Anyone else? Pairwan? Ken?
Yeah, maybe
Ken,
a
I
quick
know
one,
you want to
Andini.
say something. Go ahead. Yeah.
Just really an additional point there. I think capacity building is important, as Giovanna said, but in Indonesia, more so than most other countries, there's really a need to make sure you kind of support that with changes in either regulation or policy that requires people to implement it at specific points in terms of project identification, preparation, and implementation. So I think that was highlighted in one of Pat Boy's slides earlier about the framework, the ESG framework that he described. And I think that's quite important. And at least then you can hang the capacity building and knowledge sharing, off that legal requirement. I think that's also very important for Indonesia.
Right. Pairwan?
Yeah, I think I can add that I have a view and also the experience that the SNE aspect tends to be viewed as the another technical specification, another technical requirement for the projects. So once the national government or the central authority set this as for example, a national requirement, then easily, the government contracting authority or the staff will adhere to the requirements. So I think the trend is quite positive. For example, we see in the Ministry of Public Works, they have this plan to infrastructure projects, PPP infrastructure projects conducted under the Ministry of Public Work will be governed by best practice SNE compliance, for example. So it's a work in progress, but I think we see the intention from the national government to do that. And also, needless to say, is the Ministry of Finance. So PPP projects and especially projects facilitated by the Project Development Fund, PDF, for example, will also be required to comply with the best ESG practice. So once we have this national requirement set, either by the Ministry of Finance, by BAPENAS, the National Development Planning Agency, for example, and also by the technical sector ministries. Yeah. So when we have that requirement, then the related government contracting authority and all the staff will be able to comply to that and will make effort to comply with that regulations. So yeah, I think that's, and so far I think we see that there is government intention on that direction.
Pak Taufik, thoughts? And also, Mas Boy, you can also share your thoughts on this. Silakan, Pak Taufik.
Yeah, thank you, Andini. I think capacity building is important. I agree. And in local government, I think we have at least three important institutions that should be need more capacity building, not only in government, but also, local government, but also in parliament, because some of it, they will be involved in this project, especially in agreement, making a policy, something like that. And also the regional owned enterprises. In case of water supply, we have regional water enterprises, and then the water enterprises in local government, in municipal and agency. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can something.
Yes, go ahead,
Yes,
Mas Boy.
thank you, Andini. I think the first thing is capacity building is very important. Of course, it's very important to set the tone and also to provide the further information about the ESG itself. But the most important is actually on the path forward, on how we actually engage with the GCA on daily routines, and also how to engage on the project itself, so we can truly transfer the knowledge to the GCA itself. And also, it is very important actually on further how we can further discussion with the lenders, with the investor about this topic, about the ESG and also the project itself, so it can have an actual or concrete evidence for the project itself. I think it's very important. Thank you.
Very important indeed. We have another question coming. Yes, as time, we still have more time actually for Q&A. We have from East Java government. From East Java government, we have Mas Fauzi asking about water project. Does water project in the sector such as flood control, water sanitation, upstream conservation have an opportunity for green financing? Flood control, water sanitation, and upstream conservation, do they have a chance for green financing? I guess, Pak Irman, you can share your thoughts on this. And I would like to also hear from the global experience regarding this matter, particularly if we can implement this in developing countries such as Indonesia. Pak Irman?
Yeah, I think we have, I understand the questions coming from, public sector agencies, yeah. So there's a potential two way of doing it. First, for example, with state budget, and at which you can access, for example, multilateral or bilateral fundings. So under the G2G window, basically there's facilities provided by donors to work on this kind of project development up to the project implementations, and also for private sector participation. at which, for example, the PPP, public-private partnerships, or for example, working with BUMD, for example, is also potential avenue on how to leverage private sector skill, for example, and also private sector financings. So the general theme of this kind of project, for example, can be designed along the, for example, natural resources preservation, for example, increasing access to sanitation, for example. So I think if we can, as part of the improvement in surface water management. So as we have drinking water supply projects, eventually, the cycle should be completed. So eventually we will have wastewater projects. I think we should have that. So we already have these municipal waste projects ongoing, as already mentioned by Pak Taufik, in Legok Nangka, in Nambo, for example. So that's municipal waste project. We have drinking water supply project. So eventually the cycle will be closed by the wastewater and sanitation project, for example. So and eventually the design philosophy of this project can be made in terms of preservation of ecosystem, natural resources, ecosystem management, for example. So it's not that may not directly link to the reduction of energy use, for example. So we can see on case by case basis whether such project can have climate change benefit. But overall, within the reservation of natural resources, for example, that alone can be categorized as the sustainable projects and will be eligible for sustainable financings. And we in developing the case, we can also build the case not only from the environmental aspect but also from the social aspect. So in case of Indonesia, at which access to drinking water, access to sanitation is still below average, such opportunity to access sustainable financing is, I think, wide open.
Ken, you're familiar with Indonesia, very familiar, if I may say. So let's say if like East Java provincial government, they want to propose this type of project, sanitation, water sanitation, and then flood control, and upstream conservation. Is that something that is feasible for green financing?
I think it is. I think depending on the scale of the projects, typically some of those could be a bit small for PPP. But I think if you could identify a project with enough scale, then I think surely, yes, they would tick the box in terms of being able to attract green finance and sustainability, backed, financiers. I think I mentioned earlier, Andini, about, the need to, for project owners to look at labeling for sustainability, because, anybody can say my project is sustainable. We tick the box. But what is that? How do you formally show that to the private sector in terms of the lenders and the DFIs? So I think that's quite an important point. It's about I think those projects can benefit from accessing those type of financing, but it's about how you go about accessing those, and that's about making sure you're designing projects that meets the expectations of the criteria set out by those institutions who set up those standards, whether it's IFC's kind of performance standards or other standards that are set by such labeling institutions that I mentioned. So I think that's another really important point, I think, when you're looking to decide whether to access that type of funding.
Okay, the next question is for Giovanna and also for you, Ken, and Irman, you can jump in on this one too as well. So what are the first steps GCAs can take to implement ESG and fully benefit from the framework, specifically in balancing the affordability and bankability aspects, as mentioned by the example from Pak Taufik in West Java? So what are the first steps GCAs can take to implement an ESG? Giovanna, I guess you can go.
Thanks. Thanks, Andini. Look, I think I'm going back to the point that my colleagues from ADB did at the beginning, right? And it's project preparation, but it's also project screening, right? So one of the I think first steps that GCA could undertake is really to have, when they are deciding which projects to pursue, to have among the various technical criteria or financial criteria, to have also some ESG criteria, because it's very important. It's a very important step, and it helps you to screen in or screen out, depending on how you see it, right? What projects are the most beneficial, where you can get more value for money, and then, where you can start investing your money in project preparation more wisely. So I think that would be a good start. And then it's also like later, when it comes to really, you have decided your project and you go into and you start doing your pre-feasibility and later the feasibility, it's really start to thinking about win-win situation. And I can give you an example here that is linked to the previous question around wastewater treatment, right? We have a project where essentially we were able to turn an ESG risk, and specifically the inability to discharge the water into the river because of the biodiversity sensitivity of the river, into a win-win solution, because we were able to work with the technical team and to also identified some industrial operators in the area that then they need water. So the treated effluent could be used in the processing water of this industry. So you have the win-win on one side, that you are not discharging in a sensitive environment. And on the other side, you have the win or the plus, that you are reducing the consumption of water from an industrial users, and this can only be beneficial for if we think about climate change and the impacts of climate change on water sources. So screening of project, and then thinking outside the box to capitalize, and what ESG risk can be turned in opportunity and win-win situation. Thanks.
Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, just to repeat myself a little bit, I think there's two elements on this that GCAs can do. One is going back to planning again. I think those who know me know that I keep talking about planning as a big issue for PPP projects, and the same for water sector. I think government, regional government or cities should reach out to whether central government or development partners such as IFC and ADB and the World Bank to really support itself how to plan for a water sector in whatever area they cover, because you need to start on the right platform, and I think that's really quite important here for applying ESGs at a planning stage. And I think really going back to the other point then is sorry, just my train of thought just left me. Actually, I just gone. So thanks, Adini.
Yeah, it happens all the time, Ken. And I know how it feels. So we are in Dubai right now in a hope for bolstering investment opportunity, particularly in this water project that we have in Indonesia. I guess I would like to hear from all of you. We start with Pak Taufik, and then Pak Irman, and then Ken, and then Giovanna, and then Pak Boy. You have to conclude this. So how can we maximize, I guess, this opportunity to partner up with UAE in terms of we have a project in Indonesia, such as in West Java right now, that has a long-term investment benefit, and then also there's an ESG implementation in it. So how can we I guess in a way to strengthen the partnership between UAE and Indonesia by involving them in this project? How should they miss this opportunity? Is this like a good opportunity for them to be involved in? I guess that's the question. Pak Taufik, silakan.
Yeah, thank you, Andini. I think for honorable UAE investors, I think this is a project that shows the collaboration between government central government and also provincial and municipal government, and we will serve the 120,000 inhabitants for new connection for water supply. And we hope that the UAE investor can involve and also can join also in this project. I think we've supported from PTSMI that already make some preparation. The feedback from you is very important, and we hope that this project can be implemented for serving the people of West Java. Thank you very much.
Pak Herman?
Yeah, I think for any projects, basically, what we need is leaderships. Yeah, so we will need leadership in the national ministries, in the local governments, for example. So the political leaderships will need to align with the the project leaderships. But basically, from my experience, political leadership very much is the underlying requirement for the project leaderships to arise. Yeah. So if we have these political leaderships, then the relevant government agencies, either in the national level or in the local level, provincial or city level, for example, will be able to react and respond to these political leaderships, and to the extent that they will be able to make in-time decision and informed decision on the projects. So, and this basically will encourage participation from, for example, from the private sector eventually. So that's, I think, my key message. Yeah.
Ken?
Yeah, I'll just like concur with Pak Owen. I think that's spot on in terms of leadership here. I think I mentioned the need to apply ESG across the value chain, so upstream, midstream, and downstream. And I think that really ties into what Pak Owen just mentioned. We need those key stakeholders who are making decisions on the raw water intake facility, and then the people who are responsible for the treatment and transmission facility, as well as then offtake, distribution, facilities. We need those leaders to be coherently talking about how to apply ESG and to recognize that this is a long-term game in terms of project costs and ultimately, the value for the people. I think that's all I would like to say.
Giovanna?
Look, from my perspective, there is an infrastructure gaps, right? And the private sector is very much important in closing the gaps, and the private sector and international financial institutions, right? They come with, importantly, ESG standards that, as I mentioned before, they are not a burden, but they are an opportunity. They are a risk management tool, and they can lead also to creative and win-win solutions. So I can just repeat here myself and stressing the importance for everyone to be on the same page and start thinking about ESG principle from the very beginning, as also my colleagues have just said. Thank you.
Last but not least, Mas Boy.
Thank you, Andini. Yeah, I think in relation with the G20 of Indonesia presidency in the G20, it is good opportunity actually on how we can show to the world that Indonesia already provide and also implement the ESG services. And this may also be beneficial for the investors, for the lenders to have the lower cost of fund, which also will be beneficial and can be multiplied to the society in the West Java and alongside with the another city that will replicate this project. And I believe that we and Ministry of Finance, we do have a lot of project pipelines down the line. So hopefully that we can deliver one project to provide a greater services for the society. That's all. Thank you.
And towards a climate resilient investment, because if we're talking about climate change, if it's a shark, then water issue is the teeth. So it is very crucial to put focus on this. To our speakers, thank you very much. Please give a round of applause to Giovanna, to Ken, and then to Pak Taufik, Pak Irwan, and then of course, Mas Boy. Thank you very much. And we have a token of appreciation. Before I forgot, we have a souvenir for all of our speakers. Boleh dibantu to panitianya, silakan dibantu. And then we should, as a good Indonesian, we shall take a picture. That is mandatory in our culture. So let's take a picture, a group photo. Mas Boy, you should be on the screen, not me. Let's take a picture on my cue. 3, 2, 1. Another one. 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to all the speakers. And we have a souvenir for the speakers in outside Dubai. We'll send the souvenirs to you. Don't worry. This is for you, Mas Boy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And then all the speakers, you will receive. Please check out your mailbox in no time. Thank you. Good afternoon and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I will return the screen to Alin in Jakarta. Alin, take away.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Andini Effendi, for a very engaging and interesting discussion. If I may summarize some highlights from the discussion, we just see the project showcase number 2, Greater Cirebon Metropolitan Water Supply, the PPP project, or widely known as Jati Gede project. The project cost $219.4 million, and the project owner is taking ESG principles implementation in every step and aspect of this project. And I think, as also highlighted by Giovanni, that ESG principle is very important as a tool for risk management, and also highlighted by Kin that this carry long-term benefits for the people, as well as being mentioned by Andini Effendi that by implementing ESG principles in PPP project, it will bring greater good and benefits for the society.